He said, "I booked you a flight, Mum. Just go to the airport. Everything's ready." So I did. I went. I packed the little suitcase with the worn zipper, the same one I used when I used to visit them twice a year, back when I still believed visits were invitations, not tolerances. I wore the good coat, combed my hair, left the house key under the mat even though I knew no one would come by, and I went. The terminal smelled like rubber soles and stale pretzels. I sat down near gate 17 like he'd said, though there wasn't a flight to Denver listed. Not then, not an hour later, not even after the 5th time I asked the attendant. "No reservation under that name," she repeated gently, like I was someone fragile. She asked if I wanted her to call someone for me. "No," I said. "He'll call." But he didn't. I sat there through 2 meal services, through 3 seat changes, through the shifting light of late afternoon. My phone buzzed once, a weather alert, and then nothing. No flight, no ticket, no call. Just a message 3 days later. "Sorry, we needed the room for the baby." It didn't hurt the way people think pain works. There wasn't a dramatic gasp or a scream. There was no public scene. It was quieter than that, like something sliding off a high shelf and landing without a sound. I read the message, blinked once, and put the phone face down on the bench beside me. That was all. I don't remember much of the next 2 hours. I must have walked somewhere, because I ended up in the airport motel. The kind where the lights hum and the carpet gives off that low, tired scent of too many lives passing through. I signed the form with a hand that didn't shake. I asked for a room with a window. The man at the desk didn't look at me twice. That helped, somehow. In the room, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The comforter was stiff with starch. The TV blinked silently. I looked down at my shoes, still polished, still too tight. I didn't cry. I didn't even take them off. I remember thinking, I raised a man who couldn't call me back. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I was too soft when I should have been stern, or too proud when I should have asked for help. But I remember holding him as a baby, feverish, his head tucked into the space between my neck and shoulder. I remember sitting through parent-teacher conferences, working doubles to afford that damn science kit he only used twice. I remember skipping my own birthday dinner to watch him walk across a stage and get a diploma I helped fund. I remember everything. So maybe it wasn't that I did something wrong. Maybe it was just that he stopped looking. The room was cold. I wrapped myself in the throw blanket I always kept in my carry-on, the one with the faded roses. I could have called someone, my cousin in Virginia maybe, or even the woman who used to live next door and sent me Christmas cards long after we stopped talking. But I didn't, because the silence was part of it now. I needed to sit in it, to hear what it had to say. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was a flat white disk in the sky, and the airport shuttle coughed exhaust into the air like it was trying to make a point. I stood at the window, holding a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, and realized something. I wasn't going back. Not to their house. Not to the little converted laundry room with no closet. Not to the cold glances and obligatory Sunday dinners. Not to the waiting. I wasn't going back because there was nothing left to go back to. I still had the envelope, the one with the old address from 30 years ago. I kept it out of habit, tucked into my wallet between expired coupons and a grocery list I'd written on a napkin. It was a place I hadn't thought about in decades, a street I'd avoided driving past, a name I'd only whispered once, maybe twice, after too much wine. But now, suddenly it felt like a map, not to the past, to something else. I folded the blanket, made the bed, left a tip for the maid, and checked out without saying a word. My knees ached, and my suitcase pulled to the left like it had a limp. But I walked, slow and certain, to the train station. Not because I had a plan, because I had a direction. The motel clerk didn't ask why I was leaving so early. Maybe he didn't care. Maybe he'd seen it before. Older women in good coats with no one waiting. I walked to the train station 3 blocks down, past a gas station and a shuttered diner, dragging my suitcase with the stubborn wheel. The city hadn't woken up yet. It was just me and the birds, and a delivery truck exhaling cold into the morning. At the station, I bought a ticket with cash. Didn't ask for a discount. Didn't say where I was going out loud. Just pointed to the name on the screen. The girl at the counter looked at me like I was visiting a ghost town. In a way, I was. The train was half empty, the kind with torn seats and plastic trays no one used. I took the window, rested my hands on my lap, and watched the landscape turn from glass buildings to tired fields. The motion helped. It was like the train was carrying the ache out of me one stop at a time. 3 hours later, I was there. I hadn't said the name in years. Little town, half sleeping in its own dust. The platform was cracked, the station unmanned. One rusted bench, one vending machine with nothing behind the glass but stale air and shadows. But I knew the street. I remembered the curve of the road, the way the sidewalk buckled near the church. I walked slowly, the wheels of my suitcase catching on the gravel. I passed a bakery that used to sell the best rye bread. It was a vape shop now. The corner pharmacy was gone too. But the trees still bent the same way over the street, like they remembered what it was to lean into wind. I stopped across from the house. Not my house. Never was. But once it had been the place where I laughed too loud and kissed someone I shouldn't have and wrote my name in steam on a kitchen window. It had green shutters then. They were white now. The fence was newer, the porch light fancier. But it was still that house. And in the window, just for a moment, I saw my own reflection. Not in the glass, in the woman standing inside. She was older, heavier, with silver hair twisted back and glasses perched low. But she moved like I used to move, sharp but tired, holding a coffee mug in both hands like it was an anchor. I didn't wave. I didn't walk up. I kept going. I didn't want to explain myself. Didn't want to knock on a door and be told, politely or not, that the past wasn't welcome anymore. Instead, I turned down the next street. 3 blocks later, I was standing in front of a small brick house with a crooked mailbox and wind chimes made of forks and keys. The same ones that used to clang when we snuck in late from school. The name still on the box. L. Dorsey. I hesitated, then knocked. Footsteps. A pause. Then the door creaked open. Lena Dorsey looked older, of course. Her hair was thinner, dyed too dark. Her eyes scanned me like she was flipping through a memory she hadn't opened in years. Then she blinked. Marie? I nodded. She didn't ask why I was there. She just opened the door wider and said, "Come in." The inside smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. Same couch, same wall clock, different pictures. She lived alone, that much was clear. No toys on the floor, no sounds of television or voices in another room. Just the faint hum of a refrigerator and the soft ticking of that old clock I remembered from the kitchen. She didn't hug me. We weren't that kind of sentimental. She made tea, poured it into mugs that didn't match. We sat at the table without speaking for a long while. "You look good," she said finally. "I look old." She smiled. "We all do." Silence again. "Do you need a place?" she asked. I nodded. "Just for a few nights, if that's all right." She shrugged, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Of course." And that was that. No questions about why I left, no asking about my son. Just a bed made up in the spare room, the one that used to be filled with boxes and fabric swatches and old records. She cleared the space without fuss. That night, I lay on a mattress that sagged in the middle, beneath a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and starch. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe. Not silence, not really. Just the soft creaks of age, the hum of a life lived slowly. I wasn't home, but I wasn't waiting anymore either. And that, somehow, was enough. The morning light in Lena's kitchen came in sideways, filtered through lace curtains that had yellowed at the edges. It made the table glow, softened the chipped paint on the cabinets, made the cracked tiles seem like design choices instead of age. I sat with a cup of weak coffee and listened to the refrigerator make its slow clicks and sighs. Lena had already gone to work. She still cleaned houses part-time. "It keeps me moving," she'd said the night before, wiping her hands on a towel. "And I don't like depending on anyone." I'd just nodded. There was nothing to add to that. I didn't want to be a guest, not really. But I also didn't want to leave. Not yet. I didn't know where I'd go. The train ticket had been one way, on purpose. So I walked, not with a destination, just to see if the sidewalks remembered my feet. Past the old school, now a storage facility. Past the library, still standing though half the windows were boarded. And past the corner store where we used to buy cinnamon gum and lemon drops. It was closed, the windows covered in paper. But the door still had the same brass handle, polished by decades of hands. I turned down Birch Street. That's where my mother used to live. Her old duplex had been painted a sad shade of blue, the kind that looks tired even when it's new. There was a dog on the porch now, something small and yappy. A wind chime tapped softly above the door. I didn't stop. Instead, I kept going until my legs ached, and I ended up in front of the town hall. Still the same stucco, still the same faded flag. I sat on the bench outside and watched people pass. Mothers with strollers, teenagers glued to their phones, a mailman with a limp. None of them looked at me. That used to bother me. That feeling of being invisible once you passed a certain age. But today, it gave me space. Privacy, even. The world didn't expect anything from me, and for once, I didn't feel like giving. I sat there until the wind picked up and made me zip my coat. Then I walked back to Lena's. She was already home, her cleaning supplies stacked by the door, her back hunched in that way that only long years of quiet work can teach. She looked at me and tilted her head. "You went walking." I nodded. "You find what you were looking for?" "No," I said, "but I found something." She didn't press. Later that evening, she brought out a photo album. Old school, leather-bound, cracked at the corners. We flipped through it together, not for nostalgia, but for something quieter. Proof, witness, memory. There was a picture of us, 22 years old, sitting on the hood of her father's truck, legs swinging. I was holding a milkshake. She was barefoot. "I used to think we'd end up living next door to each other," she said. "I used to think I'd matter forever." The words hung between us like dust in sunlight. Lena didn't say, "You do." She didn't lie. She just reached over, took the album back, and closed it gently. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll go to the library. They're always looking for help. You still know how to file?" I let out a small laugh. "I know how to read." "That'll do." She stood, stretched her back, and flicked off the light. I sat a while longer at the table, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a timeline. But I had a beginning. And for now, that was enough. Lena's car was older than memory, with duct tape on one mirror and a heater that coughed before it warmed. We rode in silence most of the way, her hands steady on the wheel, her jaw tight the way it got when she was holding in opinions. She parked behind the library near the dumpster, same as always. Said the front spots were for people who still thought they mattered. Inside, the building hadn't changed. Still smelled like paper and coffee, and something faintly floral, like a grandmother's lotion. The carpet was new, probably installed over the old orange one we used to sprawl across as girls, flipping through magazines we weren't supposed to read. The head librarian was a soft-voiced man in his 60s, with a clipboard and crooked glasses. He looked me up and down once, then asked, "You have experience?" "Enough," I said. That was all he needed. He put me in the back room with a box of returned books and a cart with one wheel that squeaked like it had secrets. I didn't mind. It was quiet, and I could move at my own pace. Shelving novels, alphabetizing biographies, sliding history books into place like puzzle pieces. There was something comforting about order, even if it was someone else's. By noon, I had worked up a sweat. My back complained, but my hands found rhythm. A young woman came in, maybe 22, with hair the color of plums and earbuds tucked in both ears. She barely looked at me. She dumped a stack of books on the desk and left. I remembered being that age, certain that nothing before me mattered, certain that every woman with lines on her face had nothing left to teach me. After lunch, Lena appeared with 2 paper cups and a look that said she didn't want to talk about her morning. We sat outside on a bench in the thin shade of a brittle tree. She handed me the cup. It was coffee, barely warm, but sweet. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She didn't offer advice. She just sipped, squinted into the light and said, "You gonna stay?" "I don't know," I said. "Good." I looked at her. "Means you haven't given up," she added. That night, we made soup. Nothing fancy. Potatoes, carrots, onions. The broth came from a box, and the bread was day old, but we ate it like it was something sacred. We sat at the table and didn't talk much, just the clink of spoons and the hum of the refrigerator, a quiet that didn't ache. After dinner, I offered to do the dishes. My hands still remembered the movements, even if they didn't move as fast. Lena dried. We didn't speak, but something passed between us, old and quiet and grateful. Later, I sat in the spare room, flipping through a notebook I found in my bag. I'd brought it by accident. It was supposed to hold grocery lists and reminders, but instead it had a few lines I'd written long ago when things had just started to change. Don't expect gratitude. Don't wait for thank yous. Raise your child to be free, but don't be surprised when he uses that freedom to leave you behind. I closed the book. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to be bitter. But I didn't want to lie to myself either. Something had broken that day in the airport. Not all at once. It had been cracking for years. I just refused to look closely. Now I was looking. And what I saw wasn't failure. It was survival. It was the shape a woman takes when she has nothing left to hold but herself. I turned off the light and lay down on the creaky bed. Outside, the wind pushed through the trees, not howling, just moving, reminding the world it was still there. And so was I. The guest room smelled faintly of starch and something older, maybe cedar, maybe just time. I lay still for a while, listening to the house settle. Every creak was familiar but distant, like hearing an old song played in a different key. The bed dipped in the middle. The pillow was too thin. But I slept. Not deeply, not the sleep of someone safe, but the kind that comes after a long fall. Your body stops bracing. You just land. In the morning, I folded the blanket, straightened the sheets. Habit. Even if no one looked, I did. I moved through the kitchen quietly. Lena wasn't up yet. I didn't want to wake her. I made coffee, slow and soft. The old machine wheezed like it had lungs. I didn't mind. I sat by the window with the cup. The street outside was still half asleep. A dog barked somewhere, then nothing. I watched the light inch across the floor. Let it touch my bare feet. Let it remind me I was still here. When Lena came out, she didn't greet me, just poured herself coffee, sat down across from me, and sighed like she'd been holding it in all night. "You okay?" she asked. "No." She nodded. "Me neither." We sat like that, two women in old sweaters, the air between us full of unspoken things. That's what made it bearable. The fact that nothing had to be explained. I didn't owe her my reasons. She didn't expect a performance. After breakfast, I walked to the store. Lena had left a list. Bread, milk, something for dinner. The market was small, the same one we used to sneak candy from when we were 12. The owner had changed, but the air still smelled like citrus and freezer burn. I moved slow through the aisles, reading labels I didn't need to read, letting time pass on purpose. At the checkout, a girl in her 20s scanned the items without looking up. Her nails were long, her boredom louder than the music overhead. "That it?" she asked. I nodded, paid in cash, took the bag. Outside, the sun was too bright. I squinted. My knees ached. The sidewalk seemed longer than I remembered. Halfway home, I passed the old community center. The doors were open. I peeked in, just to see. Inside, two women were setting up chairs in a room that smelled like dust and lemon polish. One of them saw me. "You here for the meeting?" she asked. "What meeting?" "Senior volunteers," she said. "We do a meal drop-off, some paperwork help, that kind of thing." I hesitated, then stepped inside. "I'm not sure I'm staying long," I said. "That's fine. Neither are most people." They gave me a clipboard, a list of names, a route to walk the next day. Nothing heavy, just groceries, forms, smiles. When I got back to Lena's, she was fixing the heater in the back room. She looked up, squinting through cobwebs and effort. "You're late." I volunteered. She paused, then grinned. "Of course you did." Dinner was quiet. Soup again, but richer this time. Beans, tomato, thyme. I washed the bowls. Lena dried. No music, no television. Just the clink of ceramic, the soft scratch of dish towel against plate. Later that night, I sat on the back porch. The sky was dark, but not black. The stars here still tried. I pulled my coat tight around me and let the cold into my lungs. I thought of the baby, the one they'd cleared the room for. My room. My things. I thought of the crib where my suitcase had once stood, waiting. I wondered if they'd even mentioned my name to the child. Maybe not. But I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Anger had edges. This was rounder. A slow, low ache, like bruising. It didn't scream. It pulsed. Behind me, the house breathed steady. I looked at the dark window where Lena had already gone to sleep. And I let the night hold me, gently, the way no one else had in a long time. I didn't need to be needed, not anymore. But I needed to be real again. And this was real. The next morning, the route felt longer than it looked on paper. My knees complained on every step, but I didn't stop. The list was tucked into my coat pocket, the grocery bags cutting lines into my fingers. I took my time. Nobody was expecting speed. First stop was a pale yellow house with an uneven walkway. A man opened the door, mid-70s, oxygen tank behind him, shirt buttoned wrong. He blinked at me like I was memory he couldn't place. "Meal delivery," I said. "Oh," he muttered. "Right." I handed him the bag. He didn't thank me, but he didn't slam the door either. I took that as something. The next two houses were easier. One woman asked if I wanted to come in. I said no, gently. I wasn't ready for anyone else's living room yet. I barely belonged in my own. By the last house, my hands had warmed through the plastic bags. The door creaked open before I could knock. "You must be Marie," the woman said. I paused. "I am." "I heard about you. Lena said you were back." Her name was Cora. Big hands, wide shoulders, voice like sand. She invited me in before I could say no. I stepped across the threshold out of politeness, not comfort. Her place was tidy, cluttered only with plants, succulents and vines crawling along every windowsill. She poured me tea I didn't ask for, placed a cookie on a napkin without comment. We sat. "You've been gone a long time," she said. "Most of my life." "You come back for something?" I looked at her. Honest face. No angle. "No," I said. "I came back because there was nowhere else left." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. We didn't speak for a while. Just sipped, listened to the pipes knock in the walls. "You want to keep doing the route?" she asked. "I think so." "Good. We need more people like you." I left with an extra cookie wrapped in foil. As I walked back, I thought about the way she'd said it. People like you. What did that mean now? Older, tired, invisible? Or maybe it meant something else. Still capable, still here. Back at Lena's, the house was quiet. She was napping, her book folded on her chest, mouth slightly open. I didn't wake her. I went to the kitchen, warmed the leftover soup, and ate standing by the sink. There's something about silence after service that feels earned, not lonely, just clean. That evening, we sat on the porch again, bundled in mismatched blankets. The street was mostly dark, a few porch lights flickering on automatic timers. A car rolled by slow, windows fogged. "I saw Cora," I said. "She still make those hard cookies?" "They're softer now." Lena chuckled, low and brief. "She asked if I came back for something," I added. "And?" I didn't know what to say. Lena took a sip of her tea, eyes on the street. "You came back to remember who you were," she said, "before everything got heavy." I didn't answer, not because I disagreed, but because I hadn't thought it in those words. We sat until the air turned sharp. Later, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about tomorrow's route, about the names on the list, about the way my hands had moved again, lifting, sorting, giving. Not for praise, not to be thanked, just because I could. And maybe that was enough to begin. It was in the bottom of my suitcase, folded into a pouch I'd forgotten was there. I was looking for a scarf. It had turned cold overnight, and instead found the envelope. It was soft with time, the paper almost velvety at the edges. Inside, 7 letters, each in my own handwriting. No stamps, no dates. Just the same salutation on everyone. "Dear Michael." I didn't remember writing them, but I knew when I had. Long nights, long waits, times when he didn't call. Birthdays missed, holidays shortened. Moments where I sat in a room full of people and still felt like I'd been left behind. They weren't angry letters. That would have been easier. They were careful, quiet, too polite for the ache they carried. I read the first one slowly. "I know you're busy. I know things get hard. I just wanted you to know I made your favorite stew today. The kitchen smelled like the old apartment, remember? You used to dip your bread in the pot before it finished cooking. You said it was cheating. I didn't stop you." I folded it again, laid it beside me on the bed. The second letter was shorter. Something about a movie we both liked coming on TV, how I laughed alone and said his lines out loud. I'd written, "The living room still echoes you." I read all 7. No tears. Just a quiet hollowness in my chest. Like a room you walk into expecting furniture and find only dust. Lena knocked once before entering. She looked at the letters spread out beside me. Didn't touch them. "You want me to go?" she asked. "No," I said. She sat at the edge of the bed, waited. "I was trying to remind him," I said, "who I was, who we were." "You think he forgot?" "No. I think he chose not to look." Lena nodded. "That's worse." We didn't talk for a while. The letters sat between us like the third presence in the room. "You gonna keep them?" she asked. "Yes." "You gonna send them?" "No." "Good." That night, I tucked the letters back into the envelope, slid them into the drawer of the nightstand. Not to be hidden, just set aside. A part of the story, not the whole of it. The next morning, I rose early, made coffee, walked my route with steady steps, no hesitation. The faces at the doors were the same, but something had shifted in me. I wasn't performing kindness anymore. I was practicing it, for myself as much as for them. When I came to Cora's house, she was already outside. "You look different," she said. "I feel quiet." "That's a good way to be." She handed me a folded flyer. "We're doing a gathering. Potluck, nothing big, just a few of us." I looked at the paper. No formal title, no RSVP, just a time, a date, a place. "I'll come," I said, and meant it. On the walk back, I thought about how many words I'd poured into those letters, how many days I'd waited for a response that never came, and how little of myself I'd kept, believing he'd eventually notice. I reached into my coat pocket and found a scrap of paper. I wrote 4 words, almost without thinking. I was there too. I didn't know what I'd do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But for the first time in a long time, my hands weren't empty. The potluck was held in the back room of the community centre. Folding tables pushed together, mismatched chairs, overhead lights humming faintly. Someone had brought a crock pot of chili. Someone else a tray of boxed cookies. There was coleslaw that had seen better days, and cornbread that hadn't risen quite right. But no one complained. I brought a bag of oranges, peeled and sectioned, set out on a chipped blue plate. It wasn't much, but it was mine. People came slowly, mostly women, a few men, faces lined with years, some soft, some brittle. No one wore name tags, no one made speeches. We just ate. Cora introduced me to a woman named Ruth, who ran a paperwork clinic out of her garage, helped older folks with forms, pensions, insurance, even restraining orders sometimes. "People forget," she said, "how much trouble comes just from not understanding small print." I nodded. I knew. Lena showed up late, holding a pan of something she called a dump cake. It was warm and too sweet and gone in 10 minutes. She sat next to me without a word, her elbow bumping mine lightly in greeting. At some point, someone asked if I was staying in town. I said I didn't know. They nodded like that answer was just fine. We cleaned up together. Someone found a broom. Someone else took out the trash. It wasn't choreographed. It just happened. Later, as we stood outside under the 2 bright parking lot lights, Ruth turned to me. "You've got something in you," she said. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. That night, back at Lena's, I stood at the mirror for a long time, not to study my face. I knew every wrinkle, every shift in skin, but to look at my own eyes, not for youth, not for beauty, just to see if I still recognized myself. I did. But I also saw someone new, not a mother, not a guest, not a woman waiting on a call. Just me. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer. Pulled out the envelope with the letters. I didn't reread them. I didn't need to. I reached for the notebook, the same one where I'd scribbled, "I was there too." And I wrote, not to him, to myself. I am not a memory to be dusted off. I am not a favor to be returned when convenient. I am a person, with mornings and muscles and history, with laughter that doesn't need an audience. I kept writing until my hand cramped, until the page curled at the edges. Then I closed the notebook, slid it under the pillow. In the dark, I felt my chest rise, felt the breath land. Tomorrow, I'd walk the route again, help Ruth with a form or two, maybe ask Cora about the name of her plants, maybe start something small, gather old coats for the cold months, see if the library could lend space for workshops. But I wasn't doing it to be good. I was doing it because I was still here, still learning, still building, still mine. It started with a question. Lena was sorting through a box of old linens she kept in the hall closet. Some she used, most she didn't. I was folding towels at the kitchen table when she held one up, thin and soft from too many washes. "Why do I still have all this?" she asked. "Because someone might need it," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" "No," I admitted. She looked at the towel again, then said, "Let's start something." I didn't ask what. I just said, "Okay." The next day, we went to the community centre with a thermos of coffee and a pad of paper. Ruth was there, always was, her readers perched halfway down her nose. She looked at us like we were about to sell her something. "We want to do a swap," Lena said. "Clothes, linens, small things. Quiet, useful. No money." "Like a second-hand store?" "No store," I said. "No prices. Just people giving what they don't need, taking what they do." Ruth sat back, thinking, then nodded. "You'll need a room." We got the basement. Cement floor, one flickering bulb, a row of dented metal chairs. It smelled like old cardboard and bleach. We swept, opened windows. Hung a string of lights Lena had stored since 1993. We made a sign. "If you don't need it, leave it. If you do, take it." Nothing more. The first week, 3 women came. One brought a bag of baby clothes, another dropped off winter coats. The third took a pair of sturdy shoes and left without saying a word. We didn't ask questions. The second week, a man came with a toaster still in the box, said he never used it, left with a set of dishes. We made coffee, set out cookies. People stayed longer, started talking. There was no registration, no intake forms, no pride to swallow. Just a place where your name didn't need defending. Lena brought her old percolator. I brought a box of books I hadn't opened in 10 years. Ruth printed flyers. Cora helped with shelving. It grew quietly, the way something honest does. One morning, a woman named Helen came in, mid-60s, short white hair, hands that looked like they'd held too many worries too tightly. She walked slow, scanned the shelves, picked up a folded throw blanket. She held it for a long time, then looked at me. "This was my mother's pattern," she said. "The same one. I haven't seen it since I was a girl." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. She sat down, talked, widowed young, 2 sons. One moved away, one moved her in, then moved her out when his wife got tired of the tension. No fight, just a suitcase on the porch and a cab waiting. I listened, not like someone collecting pain, just someone recognizing the shape of it. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "I didn't know where to go." "You're here," I said. "That's a start." We gave her tea. She left with the blanket and a sweater 2 sizes too big that she hugged like armor. That night, Lena and I sat in the basement after everyone left. The lights buzzed. The coffee was cold. The room smelled like dust and detergent. "I think we're doing something good," she said. "I think we're doing something necessary," I replied. And in that quiet room, where everything was mismatched and worn but real, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not hope, not yet, but purpose. And that was enough to come back again tomorrow. We didn't plan to make it permanent. It started with folding tables, hand-me-down shelves, and plastic bins that cracked in the cold. But people kept coming, not just to take and leave things, but to sit, to rest, to speak. So we cleared the back corner, brought in 2 old armchairs Lena found at the dump and covered with quilts. Someone donated a rug, faded navy, edges curled. It didn't match anything, which made it perfect. We called it the corner. Just that. No plaque, no fancy name. It smelled of cinnamon from the plug-in warmer and, faintly, old books. The overhead lights were too harsh, so we brought in lamps with soft bulbs. People noticed. By week 4, someone brought a kettle. Week 5, a small table with a chipped sugar bowl and a stack of mismatched mugs. The cups never matched the saucers. No one cared. Every morning we opened the doors early, just to warm the room before people came. Lena always arrived first. She moved slower now, her back stiffened in the cold, but she still swept, still put the kettle on. I brought day-old bread from the bakery. Cora started baking once a week. Her banana bread didn't rise, but it made the whole room smell like morning. We stopped calling it the swap. It had become more than that. People brought things we never asked for: knitting needles, puzzles, small radios. One man left a box of classical CDs with a note that read, "These got me through my wife's illness. Maybe someone else needs music now." No one stole, no one hoarded. They came with care. Quiet, steady, generous. Sometimes they brought their stories, like the woman with the bruised wrist who sat in the corner for an hour and then asked if anyone knew how to change the locks, or the man who cried when he found a copy of a book his mother used to read him, the one with the torn spine and penciled-in margins. And Helen, she came back, with soup this time, and a new haircut. She sat near the front, folding donated scarves. I watched her hands, steady now, less clenched. She didn't speak much, but she stayed. One Thursday, a girl no older than 20 came in with a stroller. The baby was asleep, cheeks red from the cold. She looked around like she wasn't sure what the rules were. "There aren't any," I told her. She nodded, picked up a blanket, set it down, then sat. Didn't ask for anything, just sat, rocking the stroller with one foot. Lena handed her tea without a word. It wasn't charity. It wasn't service. It was presence. By the end of the day, she left with diapers, a wool hat, and a coat that still smelled like cedar. She said thank you at the door, voice small but sure. We nodded. That was enough. That night, Lena and I stayed after hours. The room was empty, chairs pushed in, floor swept. The kettle whistled low. We sat in the armchairs, blankets over our knees, watching the dust catch in the lamplight. "We should name it," she said. I shook my head. "It already has a name. People just haven't said it out loud." "What name?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Enough." She looked at me. "It's a place where you're enough," I said. "Not too much, not too little. Just enough." She smiled, soft and slow. We didn't put it on the door. We didn't print it on flyers. But it settled into the walls, into the worn arms of the chairs, into the way people lowered their shoulders when they walked in. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was working. The phone rang just past 8. I was drying dishes in Lena's kitchen, the towel damp in my hands. She was in the living room, half asleep in her chair, a book on her chest. The sound startled me. Not many people called me anymore, and fewer still this late. I didn't recognize the number. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, the digits cold and sharp. Something in me knew before I answered. "Hello?" A pause, then his voice. "Mum?" I didn't speak. just listened to the air between us. "It's Michael," he added, though he didn't need to. That tone, flattened at the edges, cautious, was his, always had been. Even when he was young, he'd deliver apologies like a question. I wanted to check on you." Silence. My silence. "I didn't know if you were still there. I mean, at the airport. Or if you went home." Still, I didn't speak. I could feel the dish towel dampening my palm, the air in the kitchen suddenly still. "We didn't mean for it to happen like that," he said. "It was just, things got out of hand. The baby came early and the house was so small and we needed the space and—" His voice cracked, not from sorrow but from pressure, the kind that builds when you've practiced a speech alone too many times. "I know I should have called. I just—" "You didn't," I said. He stopped. The line went quiet again. Somewhere in the background, I heard a child fussing, then a woman's voice, distant, muffled. The sound of a life I no longer belonged to. "I'm sorry," he said. Not the kind of sorry you say to make things right. The kind you say because silence feels worse. I didn't tell him it was all right. I didn't say I understood. I didn't fill the space for him. He filled it himself. "We're struggling," he said. "Marla lost her job. The baby's not sleeping. And I don't know what I'm doing. Sometimes I think about you, how you did it alone, and I wonder how you made it look so easy." I leaned against the counter, closed my eyes. "I didn't," I said. "I just didn't tell anyone when it was hard." More quiet. I could almost hear him thinking, or not thinking, just holding the phone, breathing. "I miss you," he said, softer now. I didn't realize how much until what? Until I stopped being useful, until the room I was in became the room for someone else. "I miss you," he repeated, "and I need help." My grip tightened on the towel. "I'm not coming back," I said. Calm, final, not cruel. He didn't answer right away. "Okay," he said finally. Barely a whisper. There was no argument, no defense. Just those two syllables. Small, heavy, almost childlike. "I hope you're okay," he added. "I am," I said. He waited. Maybe for forgiveness. Maybe for invitation. Neither came. "Take care of yourself," I said. "And your child." Then I ended the call. I stood there for a long while, phone still in hand, the kitchen light humming above me, the tap still dripping, slow and even. Lena stirred in the other room. "Everything all right?" she asked, voice rough with sleep. "Yeah," I said. "It's fine." I put the phone face down on the table, folded the towel, and hung it neatly over the oven handle. Then I turned off the light and let the dark hold me steady. I waited 3 days before writing, not out of strategy, not to punish. I just needed the quiet. I needed the quiet to make sure what I wrote came from truth, not bruise. The letter was short, no envelope. Just a single sheet of paper folded once, slipped into the same notebook where I'd been leaving myself notes these past weeks. I didn't write, "Dear Michael." I didn't write, "Love, Mom." I just wrote this. "You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you silence. I carried you, raised you, fought for you in rooms where no one knew your name but still had power over your future. I gave you every ounce of ease I could afford. That was my choice. I'd make it again. But it came with a cost. You asked how I made it look easy. I didn't. You just weren't watching. I don't want to be thanked, and I don't want to be needed in the way I once was. But I do want to be seen. And what you did, what you didn't do, that made me invisible, not just forgotten, dismissed. I'm not angry anymore. Anger requires energy I've earned the right to use elsewhere. I'm not coming back. Not to the house, not to the role, not to the version of me that sat quietly waiting for scraps of attention. I'm building something here. It's small, it's quiet, but it's mine, and it matters. I hope you find your way. I hope your child grows up loved and safe and better than we were. But that's your story now. This is mine. That was it. No closing line, no signature. I didn't mail it. I didn't plan to. Writing it was enough. Saying it to myself, clearly and on paper, was the first thing in years that felt like standing up straight. I folded the letter and slipped it between the pages of the notebook. Then I went outside. It was cold, but dry. The sun sat low, the light soft at the edges. I walked slowly toward the corner building we now called Enough. Not out loud, not officially, but we all knew. Cora was already there, sorting canned goods. Ruth sat with a man filling out his benefit forms, her voice even and patient. Lena adjusted the heater, still temperamental. Helen waved me over. "There's a girl asking for you," she said. In the back, a teenager stood near the bookshelf. Her coat was thin. Her eyes darted like she wasn't sure if she belonged. "You, Marie?" "I am." "My aunt said you help people here." "We try." She didn't say more, just handed me a folded piece of paper, a handwritten list, clothes, toothbrush, blanket, shoes. I looked up. "Is this for you?" She nodded. "All right," I said. "Let's see what we've got." We moved through the shelves slowly. I handed her things. She held them carefully, like they might vanish if she blinked. I didn't ask about her story. She didn't offer it. But as we packed the bag, I saw it in her shoulders, that shift, that tiny loosening, the beginning of being seen. Later, as I sat in the armchair near the window, sipping warm tea, I thought again of the letter, not as a goodbye, as a boundary. And in that space, the quiet grew kinder. The air felt full, and I felt whole. The first cold snap came early. Sharp wind, brittle leaves, windows trembling in their frames. We brought out the space heaters, stacked extra blankets in baskets by the chairs, made a pot of soup with whatever we had. Potatoes, beans, something green from Lena's back porch planter. People came anyway. They came with gloves and scarves, old coats bundled under their arms. They came for warmth, yes, but not just the kind that lives in fabric. Helen arrived mid-morning. She looked different, not in her face, still stern, still tired, but in her posture. Straighter, less braced. She carried a cake tin wrapped in a dish towel. "Raisin bread," she said. "My mother's recipe." We made tea, set out the tin, pulled the chairs close. The lights buzzed, and the radiator clanged, and outside a truck spun its tires on the ice. But none of that mattered. We sat, and we listened. And then she spoke. "My son lives 4 miles from here," she said. "You could walk it if your knees allowed. He's got a good job, a full fridge, a wife with expensive hair, and an allergy to my voice." She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. "They let me stay after my surgery. 8 weeks. I slept on an air mattress between their washing machine and the back door. No windows, no light." She paused. "One morning, I woke up with the baby's car seat on top of me. They'd run out of space. Literally. And I realized this wasn't temporary. It was never meant to be comfortable." We were quiet. Let her speak at her pace. So I packed. I said thank you. I didn't cry. I moved into a room above a bait shop. Smelled like earthworms and bleach. But it was mine. She took a breath. Not shaky. Full. "I used to think I had failed. That if your children don't want you, it's because you weren't enough. But now—" She looked up, eyes sharp. "Now I think they just stopped looking, and I stopped shrinking." I don't know what moved in me then, but I leaned forward. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't quote scripture. I didn't wrap it in something soft. I just said, I know. Her eyes met mine. I know what it's like to be useful until you're in the way, to be praised until your presence becomes a problem. I know the ache of being turned into a coat rack, something you hang things on until the shape of you disappears. No one spoke. Not Ruth, not Cora, not the woman near the door folding scarves. I went on. But I also know this. We are not leftovers. We are not burdens. We are not invisible unless we agree to be. Helen exhaled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled. Not politely, not because it was expected, because something in her had shifted into place. We sat like that for a while, in the hum, in the warmth, in the clarity. That day, more people came. Some brought food, others brought nothing but themselves. We made space. Someone suggested a sign-up sheet for meals. Someone else offered to teach basic budgeting on Saturdays. We didn't plan any of it. It happened because the room was safe. Not fancy, not polished, but real. Later, after the door closed behind the last visitor and Lena turned the kettle off, I stood by the window and watched the street empty. I think we've built something, I said. Lena didn't look up from wiping the table. We didn't build it, she said. We just stopped getting in its way. And I thought, maybe that's what strength looks like now. Not resistance, but release. The morning of the first snow, I woke early. The house was silent. Lena still asleep, the radiators ticking like old clocks. Outside, the world was softened. White edges, slow wind, the hush that only snow brings. I sat by the kitchen window with my tea and watched the light shift. No plans, no hurry, just breath and warmth and the small knowledge that today, like yesterday, I would go to the corner and open the door. At enough, we'd cleared a space for boots and coats. A low shelf held gloves in every size. Someone had strung paper stars along the ceiling. Ruth brought cinnamon sticks to steep in the tea. It smelled like memory. We expected fewer people. It was cold, after all. But they came. A man with 2 kids, the younger one wrapped in a blanket like a parcel. A woman I'd seen before but never heard speak. She left with mittens and a book. The teenager from last week returned with a friend. They helped fold clothes, stacked puzzles, wiped the counters without being asked. Helen was there early. She brought hot cider and a box of threadbare books wrapped in ribbon. For the shelf, she said. Stories need somewhere to wait. Lena set up a small table near the heater and began sorting a pile of socks, her hands slow but certain. I watched, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a guest in the room. I didn't feel like someone returning. I felt rooted. Not in the way of permanence. Nothing in life is. But in the way of presence. That afternoon, as the room quieted and the last person stepped into the snow with a blanket under their arm, I sat in the old armchair and opened my notebook. The same one that had held my silences, my truths. I wrote, I am not the sum of what I gave and was never thanked for. I am not waiting anymore. Not to be chosen, not to be remembered. I am here. I am living, and that is more than enough. I closed the notebook, slid it back under the folded scarves. By evening, the wind had picked up. Lena and I locked the door, shut the lights, left the kettle full for tomorrow. As we walked home, I didn't feel the cold the way I used to. I felt the ground beneath me. I felt the weight of my own breath. I didn't need the room I'd lost. I didn't need the call that came too late. I didn't need to be reclaimed. I had claimed myself. If you're reading this, if something in you aches the way I ached, If you've ever sat in a quiet room waiting for someone to remember you, let me say this plainly. You don't have to wait. You don't have to earn your place in someone else's life. Make your corner. Fill it with warmth. Let it be small. Let it be yours. And when you're ready, open the door. They will come. And if this meant something to you, if you saw yourself here, then leave a comment. Share it. Say it out loud. Not for me. For the next woman reading. For the one still waiting in the airport. Let her know. There's another way. And we've already begun.